Hello, my lovelies, back after the weekends with a show that is positively packed with excitement and melodies. Later, sessions from Jesus and Mary Chain and Napalm Death. In a change from our usual format, we have a roundtable chat from two music aficionados. Mr. Patrick Herwolf, fan of Bruce Springsteen, R.E.M., Billy Bragg, Elvis Costello, The Smiths, and West Ham United. And Mr. Breen O'Reilly, fan of Bruce Springsteen, R.E.M., Billy Bragg, Elvis Costello, The Smiths, and Everton Football Club. I'm off to fix myself a cup of tea and hand you over to our two guests for the evening.
It's that time we've been talking, haven't we, Breen, about the possibility of doing another one where we talk about the 5 songs that had a huge impact on us, that stopped us in our tracks, I think is the phrase we've been using to describe the significance of the impact they've had on us. Is that how you remember things? I mean, neither of us remember things particularly well with the galloping, advancing age, but...
Well, we were all aging at a different rate, but I'm doing okay. The idea was there was 5 songs that stopped you in your tracks, and maybe that was because it was you'd never heard this group or singer before and it just knocked you off your feet. But the other possibility is that it was a familiar artist and suddenly they did something completely different. So compressing multiple years of music interest into 5 songs is, of course, impossible. And
in your case, multiple with a capital M, I would say, and mine with a small m.
And a capital Y.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most difficult, how difficult was it to choose 5 songs? Because for me it was about a 14.
Well, it was easy to pick 5, but then to keep them for more than 5 minutes was extremely difficult because then the revisions happened.
Yeah.
And and I think it's also nobody can look at these 5 and say that this defines your 5 favorite songs, because I've got one on here, and it's the only song I know by this group, but I love it.
Right. So actually one of the 5 is my favourite song, and has been consistently for one of my 5 for the last, I would say, about 20 years, but more will be revealed in due course. So let's start, and why don't you go ahead and choose your first of your 5. We'll take it in turns, but I'll ask you to open the batting, as it were, and go ahead and explain the first one and talk us through why it means so much to you.
Okay, so I decided that I'd list them in order of hearing them and of influence. So the first one is David Bowie, Starman, which changed everything for me in terms of not just love of music, but interest in the world in a different way. Because if you're living in the west coast of Ireland and there's 4 or 5 people in the town who listen to music that's not even country and western, it was country and Irish, and if you hear David Bowie coming across on a radio station that you can only pick up on certain nights because he would not have been played on Irish radio at that time, it was just something that was, I don't know, alien is not the word I thought of at the time, but it probably was kind of alien. And it's just this great song that has never aged. And of course it has the same notes. It begins like Starman is the same as Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Mm. And I was at a concert once where this guy, he wrote that song Closing Time. I forget the name of the band. But he talked about how when you have notes that are that distance apart, that they're especially attractive. So Closing Time has it, and Starman has it, and Somewhere Over the Rainbow. So if you want to write a hit, that's the gap you need between your notes. And we didn't get like BBC on our TVs. We only had one TV station, which played traditional music mostly, and some country and western. But if we traveled 50 miles to my cousin's house, to Mel Morgan's house, and we were there on a Thursday, we could see Top of the Pops, and that was like amazing. And I did see David Bowie on Top of the Pops in his kitchen with his mom sitting in the corner thinking this guy was weird, and it's a memory I'll never forget.
Well, why don't we listen to your first choice, Starman by David Bowie.
Hey, no, no. Didn't know what time time it was and the lights were low. I leaned back on my radio. Some cat was laying down some get it on rock and roll, he said. Then the loud sound, it seemed to fade. Came back like a slow voice on a wave of phase. That was no DJ, that was hazy cosmic jive. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he'd blow our minds. And there's a starman waiting in the sky. He told us not to blow it, 'cause he knows it's all worthwhile. He told me, let the children use it, let the children use it, let all the children boogie. To phone someone, so I picked on you. Hey, that's far out, so you heard him too. Switch on the TV, we may pick him up on channel 2. Look out your window, I can see his light. If we can sparkle, he may land tonight. Don't tell your papa, he'll get us locked up in fright. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He told us not to blow it, 'cause he knows it's all worthwhile. He told me, let the children use it, let the children use it, let all the children boogie. Starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he'd blow our minds. And there's a starman waiting in the sky. Not to blow it, 'cause he knows it's all worthwhile. He told me, let the children use it, let the children use it, let all the children boogie.
And that was David Bowie, the 2012 remastered version. What have you got, Patrick?
Well, firstly on David Bowie, I mean, you talk about where you grew up, and that was one of the characteristics of a couple of the other radio shows we've done together. And I grew up in a very different time and a very different circumstance, but I grew up in the same town as David Bowie. And I might have mentioned that before, but in a sort of very rich triangle of musical history, of which I played no part at all. But just down the road was Mick and Keith from the Rolling Stones, and Bromley, South London, is where David Bowie and then latterly Billy Idol came from. And I would say in the world of music, David Bowie's had a larger influence than Billy Idol. But nevertheless, extraordinary that they both came from that small part of the world. And my brother was a massive David Bowie fan, is a massive David Bowie fan, and I think if he was in the show right now, he'd be choosing certainly a Bowie track as one of his 5, so it was good to hear that as part of yours. So my first song is, again, in chronological order, I would say. Not the song, but the artist. And massively predictable that it's a Beatles song, but that's how I first got into music. And I remember listening to Beatles songs arranged and performed by the Tijuana Brass Band, which was on vinyl. And that was about as far as my father, God rest his soul, went into the world of pop music. That's about as risky as he got. But it was enough to get me interested in the Beatles tunes. Of course, it was just music. There was no songs, lyrics on the Tijuana version.
Herb Alpert.
Yeah. And So then, just massively interested in the Beatles and hugely influenced by them one way or another, and really, really, really proud of the fact that they were from the UK. So many of the bands at the time and subsequently, but there was just something about being a young boy and realising that there was this group of people from the same country who are just of global cultural significance.
Yeah.
I'm already boring myself, sounding very pompous, but it was important. But then over the course of time, you find more and more Beatles songs to listen to because there are so many of them, and I didn't work my way religiously through their albums until much later, in fact. And probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I found the song that's the first one I'll share this evening. Particular relevance because I stumbled upon it whilst listening to the album with my daughter. And my daughter and I have a sort of quite unusual bond around music.
Yeah.
We like the same stuff.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those lovely moments as a father, spending time with one of your children. And we discovered the song together. And it's become something that is dear to me and dear to her. So I'll stop the introduction and I'll introduce it. And it's For No One by the Beatles.
Your day breaks, your mind aches. You find that all her words of kindness linger on when she no longer needs you. She wakes up, she makes up, she takes her time and doesn't feel she has to hurry. She no longer needs you, and in her eyes you see nothing. No sign of love behind the tears cried for no one. A love that should have lasted years. You want her, you need her, and yet you don't believe her when she says her love is dead. You think she needs you. And in her eyes you see nothing. No sign of love behind the tears cried for no one. A love that should have lasted years. You stay home, she goes out. She says that long ago she knew someone, but now he's gone, she doesn't need him. Your day breaks, your mind aches. There will be times when all the things she said will fill your head. You won't forget her, and in her eyes you see nothing. No sign of love behind the tears cried for no one. A love that should have lasted years.
So like many, you watch or listen to the discussions about are you a Lennon or a McCartney person, and if I had to choose between the two, it would be McCartney. And I think
I knew that.
Yeah,
I knew that.
And I think it's a close call, but I think that's one of the songs I would use to at least satisfy my own thinking around it, because it's beautiful. And sometimes McCartney, I think, can be parodied.
Yeah.
He did a lot of sort of recycled music hall type stuff, which in itself is fine. That isn't. It's just a beautiful song with great lyrics and very meaningful.
So what's the circumstances of discovering it, if you discovered it long after its release? How did that come about?
Yeah, just by spending more time listening to more Beatles albums rather than just the few that I first listened to. Because it's shortly after getting hooked into the Beatles, and you meander, migrate into other bands as you grow up, and sort of leave them behind, and then come back and revisit them.
Yeah.
And it really was about 5 years ago, just dipping into more albums and listening more widely, and finding that song and thinking, my goodness, this is a diamond.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. All right, now it's back to you. Sadly, we're going to stop talking about me and spend a little bit of time talking about you for your second.
Okay,
How are we doing?
so
You doing all right?
yeah, we're doing okay.
I think
So
we're doing a spectacular job.
I'm thinking that the first Bowie record that I owned, I got it for my birthday, given to me by my sister. So I didn't actually buy it myself, and my second song here is also something that I discovered through somebody else's record. So it's, as I said, growing up in the west coast of Ireland, it was all this country and Irish music, which I really didn't have any time for, but it was like loved by 95% of the country, and so I had this kind of I looked down on it. I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it, and it seemed to me like a parody of country and western, which I didn't like either. And then I discovered a country singer that just changed everything, and it was we used to buy these albums. They were called samplers. You could find this album with maybe 10 tracks from CBS Records or Columbia, or A&M would release them, and there was one with a guy called John Prine, who I'd never heard of, but he sang this song, and it was a country song, but it was not about the usual topic. It was a protest song. It was about a guy comes back from Vietnam after the war. He's got a drug problem. His life falls apart, and I think he was the first protest singer that I kind of loved, and there's a whole slew of others to follow, like Springsteen and Woody Guthrie and Billy Bragg and even The Clash. So many songs that make a social point, a political point. I really like those, but this one was one of the first, and it kind of surprised me that I could like someone who was a country singer. And the song is Sam Stone, from the first album that John Prine released, which I would rate as one of the greatest debut albums of all time, although he hates it. He says his voice is terrible on this album. So let's have a listen to
that.
Sam Stone.
Sam Stone came home to his wife and family after serving in the conflict overseas. And the time that he served had shattered all his nerves and left a little shrapnel in his knee. But the morphine eased the pain, and the grass grew around his brain and gave him all the confidence he lacked. With a purple heart and a monkey on his back, there's a hole in Daddy's arm where all the money goes. Jesus Christ died for nothing, I suppose. Little pitchers have big ears, don't stop to count the years. Sweet songs never last too long on broken radios. Sam Stone's welcome home didn't last too long. He went to work when he'd spent his last dime, and Sammy took to stealing when he got that empty feeling for $100 habit without overtime. And the gold rolled through his veins like 1,000 railroad trains, and eased his mind in the hours that he chose, while the kids ran around wearing other people's clothes. There's a hole in Daddy's arm where all the money goes. Jesus Christ died for nothing, I suppose. Little pitchers have big ears, don't stop to count the years. Sweet songs never last too long on broken radios. Sam Stone was alone when he popped his last balloon, climbing walls while sitting in a chair.
request while the room smelled just like death, with an overdose hovering in the air. But life had lost its fun, and there was nothing to be done but trade his house that he bought on the GI Bill for a flag-draped casket on a local hero's hill. There's a hole in Daddy's arm where all the money goes. Jesus Christ died for nothing, I suppose. Little pitchers have big ears, don't stop to count the years. Sweet songs never last too long on broken radios.
Okay, John Prine, first album from the early 70s.
Very good, yeah. Similarly, difficult relationship with country music, but the older I got, the more I realised that there are some artists and some tracks that I've really loved. But there isn't any country music on my list, and that's okay. But thank you for that. I'll check that one out for sure. Yeah. So I'm struggling now for my next one in terms of the order to present them. When I was at school, there was certainly a group of students who were into the Sex Pistols and the Clash and the Jam. The Jam of those three were my favourite. And I came very close to having a Jam song on this list. But there was another group who were into Echo and the Bunnymen and the Smiths, and that's a group of students, in which there were some of my great friends. And the first time I heard the Smiths, I realised that I was listening to something very, very different, and it didn't seem to be derivative in the slightest, although it almost certainly was. But the jangling guitar, you could draw a line back to the Byrds, I suppose, and maybe elsewhere, but it seemed very different. And even as a young person, 17, 18 years old, finishing school, the kind of fatalistic, nihilistic lyrics of what's the point, they really resonated with me, not just what they meant, but the beauty of them as well. So the first song I heard from the Smiths was This Charming Man, which is probably true of many of us. But actually, it's not the song I chose from the Smiths, because the song I've chosen from the Smiths is my favourite Smiths song. Again, it's become a family favourite as well, because I've had the sort of pleasure of two tolerant kids who have sort of gone on the journey with me to listen to some of the music I love, and this is one that we play in the car and sing along to together. So my next one of my five from the Smiths, There Is a Light That Never Goes Out.
Take me out tonight, where there's music and there's people and the young and the light. Driving in your car, I never want to go home, because I haven't got one anymore. Take me out tonight, because I want to see people and I want to see light. Driving in your car, oh please don't drop me home, because it's not my home, it's their home, and I'm welcome no more. And if a double-decker bus crashes into us, to die by your side is such a heavenly way to die. And if a 10-ton truck kills the both of us, to die by your side, well, the pleasure, the privilege is mine. Then a strange fear gripped me and I just couldn't ask. Take me out tonight. Oh, take me anywhere and I'm teared, I'm teared, I'm teared. Driving in your car, I never, never want to go home because I haven't got one all along. Oh, I haven't got one. Under the double-decker bus crashes into us. To die by your side is such a heavenly way to die. And if a 10-ton truck kills the both of us, to die by your side, well, the pleasure, the privilege is mine. Oh, there is a light and it never goes out. There is a light and it never goes out. There is a light and it never goes out. There is a light and it never goes out. There is a light and it never goes out. There is a light and it never goes out. There is a light and it never goes
So that's There Is a Light That Never Goes Out by the Smiths. And I never had the good fortune to see the Smiths in concert, but I did see Morrissey a couple of times in concert and would probably not go again. Not because of the music or the performance, but because of who he's become and what he talks about. But the first time I saw him was in Atlanta, and he ended the concert with that, and it was magic. It was a magic moment to hear it sung by the person himself, even if he wasn't surrounded by the band themselves.
I thought we were going to pick the same song there for a moment. We came very close with the Jam and even closer with the Smiths. But
I'm sure there'll be a few more overlaps or near misses along the way. But,
well, what a song to play in a car as you're driving along, hoping not to meet a double-decker bus.
Yeah, we turn it. Sometimes I turn it down at that line.
Okay, there's quite a lot of overlap, I think, in this part of the show. So the next one for me is when suddenly, mid-70s, along came the Sex Pistols and the Clash and the Ramones and Television and Blondie and Elvis Costello, and just a complete, I don't know, new arrival in terms of music. And the one song in there that just kind of made me stop dead was the Sex Pistols, Anarchy in the UK. It was just, the lyrics were just so different, so good. The music wasn't that many chords, but it was just great power. And I remember going out to try and buy the record, and I think it wasn't yet released in Ireland, but I went on a tour of every single record shop in Dublin to try and find the EMI version of Anarchy in the UK, which had just been deleted because they'd been kicked off that label after a few days. I didn't find it, but I did find it later. I never got to see them live, but they're so I don't know, they just changed music completely. So here, let's listen to Anarchy in the UK.
Boss it, boy, 'cause I wanna
What a song! What a song!
Yeah, they wouldn't have made my list, but I get it. And I remember when they came out, 77, 76, and I was scared. I was scared of it. I was young, I was 8 years old, and they were very present. And I remember seeing them on the Bill Grundy show and watching that go down and wondering, what kind of species they were. But they're remarkable. Bearing in mind there wasn't really a musician amongst them. But the introduction to that song is still powerful, still sends a shiver down the spine, doesn't it? Yeah.
And it sent all these people off to form a band, whether they could play or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like even bands like Madness, who none of them could play an instrument, and they wrote such melodic music later on. But the Pistols never got to Ireland, but other punk bands did. But it was so difficult because punk was associated with violence, and so many venues in Ireland just refused to let them play. So I saw The Clash. They played at Trinity College, and no other band ever played there since because they were so loud they damaged the walls of that venue. And when the Ramones came, nobody would allow them to play, so they played in a cinema that had been closed down and reopened for the night. So it was really kind of a spirit of adventure to go to a punk show. It was difficult, which made it even more attractive.
I remember one of my schoolmates going to see The Clash at the Brixton Academy because he had the sorts of parents that would allow him to do that. He came back the next day with great stories and broken ribs, and I wish I'd been there. I must admit, it was great. The closest I got really to that kind of feel was seeing Oasis at the height of their powers in Geneva, which is not quite as posh as it sounds, that venue, but we were right up at the front, and it gave me a sense of what it must have been like to be there with the Clash or the Pistols or something like that. And Oasis are a band not on my list, although I did think carefully about one or two tracks. But yeah. So if we'd been doing this show even 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I'd never have thought that this next band would have been on it in any way, shape, or form. But they are. And again, I'll go back to school days. And there were a group of kids at school that I was friendly with who were into AC/DC and heavy metal, and I didn't get it. It just wasn't my thing. And they formed bands and they played well and they knew what they were doing. And because they were friends of mine, I'd go and support them. But I just didn't get a kick out of the music at all. But when you consider that sort of style of music, I would personally, rightly or wrongly, think that the mothership really is Led Zeppelin. And I didn't understand Led Zeppelin when I was growing up at all, and I still am not a massive fan. But I took time to find out a little bit more about them and stumbled upon the next track, which I'll share, which itself is not really heavy metal in the slightest. It's just absolutely fantastic blues with a bit of force. So it acted, if you like, the song acted as a doorway into other listening. Sort of broader, wider, which is the same word, a broader and deeper look at the blues. But again, I wouldn't say even now I'm an expert or an aficionado in that, but it's just something about it, and the raw power of this song without it being heavy metal, without it being type, Motley Crue or type or Metallica type approach. And then the harmonica, which is one of my which I think is what it is, but which is one of my favourite instruments. So,
and I do believe you have dreams of being a harmonica player.
I have dreams of being many things when it comes to music, but so my next track is perhaps surprisingly "When the Levee Breaks" by Led Zeppelin.
If it keeps on raining, levee's gonna break. If it keeps on raining, levee's going to break. When the levee breaks, have no place to stay. It's got what it takes to make a mountain man keep its home. Oh, Thinking about my baby and my happy home.
Yeah, great song, great song. Something I'll investigate a little bit further. So for my next one, I'm going
We're down to our last two, aren't we?
We are,
Gosh,
we
goodness,
are.
Time flies.
This one, I first heard this at about 7:10 on a Friday night after watching The Tube, which finished at 7. Then I would flip
Don't.
over to BBC
I know
Two,
what's coming.
the Oxford Road Show. It was
Yeah.
a video shot in a basement with the Smiths, and it was This Charming Man. And I can just remember that I never heard anything like it. It was a band of 4 guys. It's got a singer, a guitar, bass, and a drum, just like every other band. But nobody had ever done something like this before. The opening guitar was something I'd never heard. It's a style I'd never heard before. The lyrics were like a novel, a punctured bicycle on a hillside desolate, not a desolate hillside. It was just so literary. The singer had this amazing voice, and they just changed music. They took something that was, so trodden out over the years of, chorus, verse, those instruments, but they changed it and made it into something completely different. I thought you had picked that.
Yeah, so close. So close. You described them so much more beautifully than I did in terms of their style and their impact. But everything you said about them, I would completely agree.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough to see them. I saw them a few nights in a row. They came to Ireland, and it was so good. And maybe the best moment was Morrissey actually parodied himself. Instead of having all the gladioli stuck in his back pocket, on the second night he came out with a small tree stuck in his back pocket. I'm not sure how it stayed in there, but a great show at the SFX, which I'm sure doesn't exist still.
All right,
So,
let's hear it.
This Charming
This
Man.
might bring a tear to the eye.
Punctured bicycle on a hillside desolate. Will nature make a man of me yet? When in this charming car, this charming man, why pamper life's complexity when the leather runs smooth on the passenger seat? I would go out tonight, but I haven't got a stitch to wear. This man said it's gruesome that someone so handsome should care. A jumped up country boy who never knew his place. He said, return the ring. He knows so much about these things. He knows so much about these things. I would go out tonight, but I haven't got a stitch to wear. This man said it's gruesome that someone so handsome should care. Na, 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 na. This charming man. Na, 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 na. This charming man. A jumped up country boy who never knew his place. He said, return the ring. He knows so much about these things. He knows so much about these things. He knows so much about these things.
Such talent, such amazing, innovation to have something like that.
It's funny you mentioned those TV shows from that era back in the UK, because you mentioned the Tube.
Yeah,
And one of the songs I nearly picked was Rockville by R.E.M., who had a massive impact on me as well. And even though they're not the Smiths, there's a little bit of an overlap in terms of the guitar style and the sense of difference. The wow factor of Michael Stipe hiding behind that hair, mumbling,
right,
not engaging, was very different at the time. But the Tube, and then the Old Grey Whistle Test, and the Oxford Road Show as well. A really. I wasn't tempted to go out on Friday nights really, because there was that block of time just to sit and watch. I think the only other band over the last 20 years that I've really stopped and taken notice of that's come out of that style of TV show was the Arctic Monkeys on later with Jules Holland.
Right.
And one of the tracks off their first album was nearly made my top 5, but it had a similar effect as it did when I was watching R.E.M. or Billy Bragg or the Smiths on the Tube. Yeah. So back I go for my next one. Back I go to school days. It all seems to start in school days, right? But I was one of the very few people at school who liked Bruce Springsteen, and I felt a little bit guilty about it because he was painting pictures in his songs of a land that nobody at school knew, not least me. I had no clue really of anything to do with the United States beyond colouring in a map in geography class or something of that nature. But it intrigued me. There was something that intrigued me. A schoolmate of mine handed me a cassette. Look it up. For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, of The River. I think 1980, perhaps that came out. And I was hooked immediately. And again, still felt a little bit guilty because it wasn't cool. He was as an artist, as a singer, older than the people from Echo and the Bunnymen or U2 or the Smiths or anything else that was coming out at that time. And he wasn't subversive. I mean, there was some protest in there, to your point earlier, but he wasn't, overtly subversive in the way some of those other bands were. But I was hooked. And as you know, Breen, because we did a whole show about this at some stage with Jake, it just means a great deal to me as a singer. So trying to distill it to one song was super tough, very, very difficult. And in fact, the song I've chosen, I first heard sung by someone else, and didn't realise it was one of his until dug a little bit deeper, did some reading around it, and you probably know which one it is already.
No, actually I don't.
And the version that I first heard is itself excellent.
Oh, I do know.
And when I found the version sung by Bruce Springsteen, and first time I heard it was live, in person, and then on the live album that came out, the double or quadruple album that I bought on the first day of release and have still got tucked away somewhere in the house safely. But then the version I'm going to share is the one off The Promise, which I found again latterly. Being someone who went through a period of time and didn't consume music religiously, but then you come back into it. And similarly to some of the Beatles songs, you find these gems. And I think it's a candidate for one of my favourite songs ever. It isn't my favourite song ever, although that could change. But I think it's an absolutely beautiful song. It's a love song, even if it doesn't sound like one. And it isn't necessarily a love song in the conventional sense. I think it's a love song about human connection. And it's Because the Night.
Take me now, baby, here as I am. Pull me close, try and understand. Desire is hunger, is the fire I breathe. Love is a banquet on which we feed. Come on now, try and understand the way I feel when I'm in your hands. Take my hand, come undercover. They can't hurt you now, they can't hurt you now, they can't hurt you now. Because the night
So I mentioned this to you before, I think, but I had the birthday gift of a lifetime a couple of years back, almost 3 years back now, when I turned 48. And
In Rome.
Never been to Rome before. Went to Rome, booked the trip, realised that Bruce was playing at the Circus Maximus. And fabulous night, and he played that song, and that was one of those moments when time stood still and nothing else seemed to matter in the world, which is, I guess, one of the reasons why we listen to music, right?
Yeah.
And engage with it. So, yeah, one of my very favourite songs. Are we down to your last?
We're down to my last, and one would think that we planned this so well, because this song is absolutely perfect because of the expression that I saw on your face when you listened to that song, about clearly what it meant to you. And this is the most recent song that I've heard that stopped me in my tracks, and I thought, that is just absolutely out of this world. It's by a British folk band called the Unthanks, which, after a bit of research, I thought it was like, I want to unthank you for that, like the opposite of thanking, but it's actually their surname. And the song is called What Can a Song Do to You? And it's a song about music and the power of what music can do. And the story behind the song is even another reason to love this song. It's written by Molly Drake, who never made an album but did record things into a cassette tape. She's the mother of Nick Drake. She was born in Burma and fled there during the war, went to India, and eventually came back to England, wrote songs and poems which were never published during her lifetime, then lost her son to suicide after him delivering some amazing albums. And the story is that she was walking down the street and there was an open window, and she heard 6 notes from a song, and she just stopped in her tracks. It stopped her in her tracks. Whatever it was about this music, it just took her to a place. And I was trying to research where the words came from, and it seems that she wrote this as a poem and then recorded it as a song. But there's a great end piece to this recording that's not in the lyrics of the song she wrote. I think it's from maybe an interview with her, or maybe a different poem. I don't know, but it's just a brilliant ending. So let's listen to... why else do I love this? I love this because of the accent of the singers is just so great, and the harmony is just out of this world. These are amazing vocalists. Okay, what can a song do to you?
Music from an open window. Music sudden, fleeting. Music from an open window. Music sudden, fleeting. Music from an open window. Music sudden and fleeting. Ordinary music in an ordinary street. Why does your heart stop beating? What can a song do to door. Music from an open window. Music sudden, fleeting. Music from an open window. Music sudden, fleeting. What can a song do to you? Can it kindle a flame that was dying till it burns once again with its joy, with its pain, and your heart's of a sudden crying? Oh, I know, yes, I know, now I see what a song has done to me.
As we were walking down the street, there came from a high-up window 6 notes of music. Then her feet, as though the road was suddenly steep and heavy with a summer's heat, came slower and very slow. Stop and tell me why you weep. Turn this way and look at me. Does it remind you of a time when you were sad? Ah, no. But it reminds me of a time when I could be. It reminds me of a time when I could be.
The last line is something like, I'll edit this out because I'm probably going to get it wrong. But the last line is something like, does it remind you of a time when you were sad? And the answer is, no, it reminds me of a time when I could have been. I thought, what an ending.
Fab.
But
I've never heard of it before, so
yeah, I never heard of it.
That's a gift. Are we recording now or not?
Oh, we are. We can edit.
That's all right.
Okay.
No one's listening. Let's be honest.
The podcast that never gets cast.
That's right.
It stays in the
best
pod.
Time. It's the best time. All right. So it's my last one. Right?
We're down to the
yeah. So yeah, back to home life. Same sort of time of my life, maybe a bit younger. 12 years old, something like that. And my sister, who's 7 years older than me, buys Armed Forces by Elvis Costello. And I get a sense when I'm listening to it that I should like it, but I didn't love it. It was nice background music, but I was into the Beatles and doing other stuff. And I think she bought it because of Oliver's Army, which is a good song and stands the test of time. But I always had this sort of curiosity about Elvis Costello, and never really fully explored it or engaged. But then, I remember this time last year or sometime last year, I did a show with Brian McManus, and we were talking about the importance of music sustaining you through transitions in life. And one of the most complicated transitions I had, believe it or not, was moving from Switzerland to America in 2002. Because even though I'd been to the States a lot and had, obviously an American wife and American relatives, I'd never lived there. And moving there, moving to the Deep South, Atlanta, Georgia, was quite a challenge on any number of levels. So what I did was, because I was homesick, although I didn't know where home was, I delved back into British music. And I didn't necessarily do it consciously, but I suddenly started listening to Squeeze again and Elvis, and Billy Bragg, and the Smiths, etc. Just sort of for an anchor, if nothing else, and a reminder of where I was from, because it seemed so literally and metaphorically far away.
Missing the tube station at midnight.
Yeah. And you know the story about, I think, driving past a tiny theatre concert venue in Atlanta, dropping my daughter off, who was 2 at the time, at daycare, and it said Thursday night Billy Bragg, and I thought it can't be the same one, and it was. And so it eventually, I realised that actually living there was an advantage on many levels over time, but certainly access to live music.
Yeah.
I mean, the number of artists and bands that came through Atlanta is huge. Big venues, small venues, and that was something I really, really enjoyed. But at that time, I started listening to more Elvis Costello, and I knew that he was, talented, smart, witty, but there was something, again, inaccessible about it when I was younger. So anyway, I got into Blood and Chocolate a lot as an album, and what's become my favourite song, and I probably messed it up, I think it's on Blood and Chocolate, but what's become my favourite song, which I'll play in any minute now, I went to the Tabernacle in Atlanta with my wife to see Elvis, and if you don't know about the Tabernacle, it's a converted Baptist church, so it's a music venue, obviously. And we were standing on the balcony, and I didn't know what I was in for because I hadn't seen him live before, and I was still sort of finding my way. And I said to Karen, I hope he plays this song sometime in the evening. And he comes on with the original band, who are obviously just off the charts talented, and it was magic watching Steve Naive live play the piano and keyboards, because there's a genius if ever there was one. And so not only did he play that song, but he opened with it, and the place was bouncing. We were up on the balcony, like I said, and it was literally bouncing, and it was fabulous. And it was one of those moments when I've started to realise that actually moving and living there wasn't going to be such a bad thing. And my kids, if they listen to this, which clearly they won't, they will groan out loud because they just don't like this song, and I don't care, because every time we're together I play it, and I play it very, very loud. So what is currently my favourite song ever, and has been for a while, although that will change, is my last song this evening, and it's I Hope You're Happy Now.
He's a fine figure of a man, and handsome too, with his eyes upon the secret places he liked to undo. Still he knows who and where, how, and I hope that you're happy now. He's got all the things you need and some that you will never. But you make him sound like frozen food. His love will last forever. Still, he knows what you want and what you don't allow. And I hope that you're happy now. Well, I hope that you're happy now, like you're supposed to be. And I know that this will hurt you more than it hurts me. He's acting innocent and proud, still you know what is after. Like a matador with his parks up while we are dying laughter. The turquoise pajamas and his motorcycle hat. I hope you're happy now, 'cause you soon prepared that. Well, I knew him well, I know
And a brilliant breakup song as well, which is always fun to end on, right?
That's a surprise. I did not expect that song.
Yeah. What else were you surprised by?
Nothing else. Well, Led Zeppelin.
Right.
I was surprised that they were there. But even my reserve list, I think, might be like your reserve list in places too.
Yeah.
But if I was to pick your favorite Elvis song, I wouldn't remember. I wouldn't think that one.
Right. Well, yeah, it's stood the test of time for me.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So if we
it
did
is
this,
Blood and Chocolate. First track.
Yeah, and there was a great moment when he played it live, and like you, I've seen him many times, and would go back for more. That's for sure. And if we did this next week, which we won't, because it's taken us 18 months to schedule this, it would change. So what are 2 or 3 that would have been on your reserve list? Which we didn't plan for, but
I had Roxy Music, Virginia Plain, just because it was so different to anything that anyone had done. It was like the birth of glam rock in a way. It was more poppy and more American than David Bowie, even though they're not an American band. But it had no chorus, and I know every word of that song, even though none of it makes any real sense, but it just has this like a deluge of imagery of things that I don't even know what they are, but it's just a great song.
Mm-hmm. Any others coming to mind?
Well, I would have to have some Bruce Springsteen in there. Like you said, a lot of the great music we come across, it's introduced to us through somebody else. And there was one guy in our town, Jerry Rogan, who told me that there was this guy called Springsteen, that he was really great, and he had an album, and he gave me Born to Run, and we used to lend albums to each other over the weekend, and I just played that over and over, and that was my introduction. I read about him in NME every week, but I'd never heard him because there was no access to the music other than the radio stations we could get, and they didn't play that kind of music. There'd be something by Talking Heads would have to be in there. And for Springsteen, what I actually would have put in was probably something from Nebraska, because he was an artist I'd come to love, and suddenly he did this turn to the left and did something completely different, which was fabulous.
She's just done again as well, it seems. But,
yes, yeah.
So I think I would have had So Central Rain by R.E.M.
Right.
Because getting into them through the Tube and seeing and hearing Rockville took me into, I think it was The Reckoning, and So Central Rain is a song that I love.
Yeah.
And then, as you know, we're both fans of Billy Bragg. We've referenced him at least once. And there's a song called Tank Park Salute, which as a title makes very little sense. But the song is about the death of his father. And I'm not allowed to play it in my house because the family thinks it's too sad, and it is very, very sad.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful song, and it was difficult keeping that off the list as well. Other than that, I could go on. I tend to. So I hope that you get access to some live music in Bucharest. Presuming it's allowed and that they have electricity and things like that. Which
well, I did see 2 concerts listed that I have no intention of attending. One is Metallica.
Yeah.
And the other one might even be worse. It's Ed Sheeran. So
a little bit of controversy to end the evening. All right, well, I wish we'd done more of these over the last couple of years, but it's been great, and I'm glad we got this one on the books and completed. It's been fun, and I've got some more songs to listen to, that's for sure.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you too. Brilliant.